the one time my mind gets to be quiet. It's the one time when I'm not constantly overthinking anything. When I'm dancing, it's sort of about the movement and the physical freedom that comes along with that, but there's also so much structure within dance and a lot of repetition. So lots of repetition in movements, in shapes, things like that. It also requires a great deal of control over your own self and your own body, and a lot of mental strength as well. So you have to have a lot of self-control and self-restraint. When I think I was about 10 years old, we moved from Queensland, where we'd been living, to Western Australia, a small town called Bunbury in Western Australia. And obviously Mum wanted me to keep dancing, so she found a dance school in Western Australia. And it was actually the only school that got back to her when she was inquiring about enrolling me. So they were the only school that replied. I ended up going there. Yeah, I found that the principal of the dance school, her teaching style worked really well with my learning style. So I just excelled and went from strength to strength under her teaching. And then I changed from just doing ballet to doing ballet and contemporary, and found my first contemporary class, she sort of pulled my mum aside and she was like, I don't think she's really getting it. I don't think she's actually very good at contemporary. Maybe just steer her away from it. And then apparently I came in 2 weeks later and was just completely different, and just gotten it into my body, and actually really, really excelled at contemporary and showed really great promise there. So then my teacher sort of put me forward for auditions with full-time dance schools when I was about 15. Then when I was 16, I was auditioning for WA Academy of Performing Arts, and I was accepted. I was one of 8 girls in the country, the youngest out of the whole intake across the country for that year. And yeah, I started at WAPA, I think it was 4 or 5 months after the audition. Moved up to Perth from Bunbury at 16, sort of living with a friend that was also going to WAPA. And then a week into classes, so it was like a full-time course, 40 hours a week, dancing, 8 hours a day. My first week in, I ended up injuring myself really severely, so I bruised bones in my foot and my ankle, and I tore ligaments as well into my ankle and all up my calf, and was pretty much out. I couldn't dance properly from then. So I ended up being withdrawn from the course after a couple of months of that. And it wasn't showing signs of healing. Doctors couldn't tell me what was wrong. We thought it was a sprained ankle at first, but it just kept swelling and bruising, and it was obviously very, very frustrating. I was, 16, and all I wanted to do was dance. That's the whole reason I was there. And I ended up being withdrawn, so I moved back down home and went back to the dance school I was at, and had a bit of a scare, saying, they thought I might need surgery when I got referred to a podiatry surgeon. Yes, so it was a surgery scare. They said, if they had done what they thought I had done to my foot, what they were saying they'd have to do is sort of perform a major surgery that would leave me unable to dance again. Definitely not at the the level that I was hoping to dance at, which was shattering. That was heartbreaking, sort of having that possibility hanging over my head at 16. Yeah, so that wasn't the case, and I just had to have a year of minimal activity to allow it to heal and get better and stop being bruised. So I was sporting pretty nasty bruising for about 6 or 7 months. Then I think it made me knuckle down even more, and I just got more determined. I sort of ignored the fact that I was meant to not be dancing 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and I was dancing pretty much the same amount. I was working full time as well as dancing after work, and I was teaching classes. I was teaching the younger girls and still competing in competitions and things like that. And then my family moved to Perth, and I had to sort of take it upon myself to find a new dance school, which was difficult. I couldn't get a reply from anyone. I mean, it's really hard to try and find a dance school to go to that I, could easily get to. So after about 6 months in Perth, I decided to move to Sydney, because I thought, Sydney Dance Company is here. They were always a company that I really wanted to dance for. They were the number one company. They really suited the style that I was most comfortable doing, that I enjoyed doing the most. So I figured if I got over here, I could find a full-time course in Sydney. And yeah, after I moved to Sydney, I went to one ballet class at the Sydney Dance Company Studios, and I just walked out in tears. I hated it for some reason. I just felt really frustrated, and with myself and with my situation, everything was so far out of my control. When it came to dancing, I remember just feeling so, I feel like a failure. I'd had so much promise, and I'd always done really, really well when I was younger. I'd been accepted into youth companies previously when I was in Queensland and in WA, and obviously getting into WAAPA at such a young age is a huge achievement. And then all of a sudden it was like, I don't know what to do with this, I don't know where to go, I don't feel like I'm good enough to sort of get to where I want to be, and I don't have the resources that I need to get to where I want to be. So I stopped dancing completely. I just walked away from it. I never did another class, never did another ballet class or a contemporary class after that. And then about a year and a half ago, I was looking through somebody's Instagram account and saw that they did pole dancing, and I figured that looks really cool. It looks like a lot of fun. I got a little bit creepy and I Googled the studio that they were dancing at and found out that it was just down the road. So I went along for a free class and fell in love, and been doing that ever since. Well, it was always to dance full-time in a company, either here or overseas. Now it's more a case of I would love to teach and be in more of a support role. I think the difference being I didn't feel like when I was injured I was shown a great deal of support or compassion or care, and I was very, very young, and I didn't feel like I received the right support in that situation there, and I could see how things could have been done better there. And I guess being with pole dancing and just being in a community that is so fiercely supportive and so loving, and I mean, like, you end up making friends across the world because of the connections that you make through pole dancing, and they all teach. They all take workshops, they all teach, and everyone's constantly supporting each other and helping each other learn. And if there's something that you can't master straight away, you've got people there cheering you on regardless. So yeah, I mean, now I'd really love to teach above all else and help other people reach goals that they didn't think they were able to. It's that horrible cliche of anorexia being rife through ballet. It makes me really sad because when I was dancing, that's not something that we actually saw. I mean, you always hear stories about, dancers have eating disorders or things like that, and from my experience, that's not something that, anyone around me had. But I guess it's only natural when you come away from something where you have such immense amounts of control and you are constantly aware of everything going on in your body, that once you don't have that outlet for it, you have to channel that somewhere else. I didn't have anything else. It came down to my body was the only thing that I could control. So I stopped eating for a very long time, like long periods of time where I'd eat very minimal amounts of food, enough just to get me through the day, and then that turns into an obsession because you don't have anything else to focus on. So that became a huge focus for me, and it's also just a natural reaction to stress. I went through a lot of stressful periods. So I lost a lot of weight. I think I was about 40 kilos at one point. It was not a very good time. It started after the injury had healed and I'd moved to Perth. I didn't have regular dance classes. I didn't have a dance school to go to. Mostly as a reminder to myself, but also because so many people go through these things and don't have anywhere to turn. I didn't know anybody else who would understand what I was dealing with or what I was doing to myself. If speaking out in some small way helps anyone in any capacity, is it not worth saying something? So it's always a case of like, I have enough people following me that I can at least inspire one person to reach out and get help, or to come talk to me, just provide solidarity and show that people aren't alone in what they're experiencing. There are other people going through it too. Yeah, absolutely. I've had so many people through my Instagram approach me and just say, one in particular, someone came to me and said, you being so candid about your own mental health and the things you've gone through really inspired me to go get help. I didn't feel comfortable reaching out and getting help beforehand, but because you've been so open and so strong in that, so because I had been able to speak out, they thought, well, what's stopping me? Why can't I? I've had multiple cases where people have come forward and be like, thank you so much just for speaking about these things. It shows that we're not alone, I guess, and people appreciate honesty. I had just turned 18, so I was still dancing at that point, but I wasn't planning on having as many as I do now. I had always wanted them, I guess, from quite a young age, and my mum and I went and got our first tattoos together a few weeks after I turned 18, and then after I stopped dancing, I just sort of saw that as a chance to sort of go a bit crazy with it. Yeah, very much so. It's not something that you'd ever be able to have in a dance company, so I think I sort of subconsciously use that as a way to distance myself from ballet, I suppose, in a way. You do see some dancers with like small tattoos or one or two, more prevalent in like commercial dance and even like contemporary dancing. I know there's a few dancers that I've seen who have, bigger tattoos, but I guess because you're, like with acting, you're stepping into another role and you're performing a character that's not yourself, so you can't really have these identifying features like big tattoos that distract from the characters. You can't be dancing Juliet in Romeo and Juliet and have the full sleeve. It just takes away from the character and the story that's being told. There's always this feeling after getting a tattoo where it's sort of like an appreciation or a love of your own body, because it now has this piece of artwork over it, and it's also a way of not covering up insecurities, but perhaps making up for them in a way. It's like, well, I don't like this about myself, so I'm going to put something that I do like on my body, and then that draws more focus on the things that I'm worried about. So yeah, in a way, definitely reclaiming ownership over myself, and then that's another thing that you can control on your own body. It's like, well, I chose to put this here. My feet. The Roman numerals on my feet. It's really cheesy. It's like everyone's first tattoo has like a meaning and a story behind it, I suppose. So 5-4 is my mum's date of birth, and 1-4 is my brother's date of birth, and they're the two most important people in my life, on the two most important parts of my body, my feet, because I dance. After I got my feet done, I got the locket on my arm with a line from an E. Cummings poem which says, "I carry your heart." And I'm a bit of a hopeless romantic, so that really spoke to me. After that, it felt unfinished, so I got the 2 roses either side, and that was literally just because it felt unfinished, so I had to do something to finish it up. And at the same time, I got the words "Let Love In" just above my elbow. I think that was just my own mantra to myself. I'd had a bad relationship with someone for about 2 years who was just incapable of letting people love them, and I never wanted to turn out like that. So I guess that was just my own little reminder to just be soft and open to things. After that, I got the horseshoe, which is not particularly good or attractive, and it warps when I bend my arm. But I'd had a particularly bad mental health scare where I had decided I didn't want to be alive anymore, and I pulled through that night, and the next day I went and got tattooed, and it says lucky just because I felt lucky to be around, I suppose, as cliche as that is, but it was important at the time, and I guess still important now. And then this one is probably the newest, and it's not finished yet. But again, that's just one that I saw that one of my friends had drawn up. She's a tattoo artist, and I liked it. And so I asked her to put it on me. In a way, yes, it wasn't the primary motivation. A lot of the time it's just been appreciation for the work that other people are doing and creating, supporting people who are artists. It's still seen as a bit of a taboo, I guess, more so on women. So on that front, yes, I do definitely agree and identify with that. But for me, it was more about self-expression in a way, but then also facilitating self-expression of others through their artwork and their passions. So I mean, I've collected pieces from people who I consider friends now as well, and yeah, supporting other people who are creative in, you know, industries that can be very, very tough and very difficult, and yeah, just also just a really good way to get to know different people that I'd probably never meet otherwise. So yeah, I feel like I probably would have had a much better shot at a position. At the time, they were very purely classical when I auditioned. My strengths definitely lie in contemporary as opposed to just ballet. Yeah, and I feel like obviously he is, I mean, it's pure speculation. I don't know the man or how he works as a creative director, but from what I see of him as a dancer and what I know of him and his story.
From Mal's Last Dancer.
Yeah. He went through obviously incredible adversity and worked really, really hard, you know, and I identify with that as a dancer in the fact that, not that I've had to face anything anywhere remotely close to what he's gone through, but as a dancer working hard and just working against all odds, even when, you know, there's no real guarantee of things working out in your favor, I guess. I identify with that as a person. As a dancer, I work very, very, very hard when I'm in a studio. I have a very one-track mind, and I'm an absolute perfectionist. And I think you definitely can pick up on that in other people. Yeah, I just feel like perhaps I as a dancer would have spoken to him more than I did to the creative director who was there at the time that I auditioned. I don't see the same future as I did with ballet and contemporary. I think it's something that I may have to work not harder for, but just in a different way. I need to find a way to sort of get my foot in the door with teaching. I don't think as a dancer you ever feel completely fulfilled with where you're at. I mean, you'd never progress as a dancer or as an artist in any capacity if you just became complacent and felt like, yeah, okay, I'm good here. You have to keep pushing forward, either with your own artistry, with choreography or technique. For me, at the moment, it's about building strength and learning tricks that I don't think will be possible for my body, and just sort of showing that I can do that. That's what I am really focused on at the moment. I try not to look too far ahead because I don't want to disappoint myself, and I don't want to sort of get to where I feel like I'm not in the place where I should be, because I feel like it's a very dangerous trap to fall into, and it means that you're not really, not so much you're not focusing on what you need to focus on, just that when you get too big picture, it's very overwhelming, like incredibly overwhelming, and just sort of like, well, how the hell do I get there from where I am right now? And you want it all to happen right at this instant. But if you just break it down and just say like, well, my goal at the moment is to get this trick in this amount of time, and you work towards that, and then you choose your next goal, and at the same time you're obviously doing other things, meeting other people, performing and competing in whatever opportunities you have. and it just sort of goes naturally from there. But I've never actually really thought much about it. I guess it makes me more appreciative of the fact that I can dance and I can perform, so I tend to put just that bit more into it. I find performing is just a very natural thing it's very hard to explain, because once I'm up there, I become completely different. It's just something that happens very naturally with me, and I think it's just something that sort of fell into place as I got a bit older and had a bit more life experience. Yeah, I mean, I guess you have to have that opportunity to know that about the dancer, and that's not a very common thing within dancing in general. I mean, you don't really see a dancer on stage and be like, oh, you know, they went through this and this. It's not something that you really have access to unless they openly speak about it. I do my best to be very open about things and be very candid about where I am and where I've come from and what I've had to go through. I think in terms of relatability to other dancers, that has helped. Not so much my audience. I feel like for me, performing is definitely a bit more separate than that. I find other ways to connect because it is just a very physical thing. But I guess if they do know what I've been through and my story, it does obviously create another connection there for them.